For Year 9, today we are starting a new text. It's called Everything I Never Told You, but we're still looking at the same skills and the same exam paper. So language paper 1, section A. And today we're going to be covering question 1, question 2 and question 3. We're going to try and perfecting our skills in answering those questions. So, as you will have noticed, with each new extract that we study, I give you less and less information about the extract and less chance to do research. That is for a particular reason, and that is because in the exam you'll have an unseen extract. What I mean by unseen is you won't know anything about the text, you won't have previously studied it or analysed it. So the question types will remain the same. Question 1 will still be retrieval, question 2 will still be language analysis, question 3 will still be structural analysis, and question 4 will be a to what extent question where you can analyse any structural or language method or specific word that you choose that answers the question, but the text itself you'll know nothing about. So we're going to be learning, covering less and less on the extracts. So what you need to do for the do now, that being said, is go to handouts and find Everything I Never Told You and read the extract. So you're going to want to pause the video now and have a read of the extract. I'm giving you about 10 minutes for that. Do use all the time. You might want to read it a couple times. So now we're going to move on to question 1 for task 1. What you're going to want to do is read lines 1 to 13. So remember, in question 1 they'll give you specific lines to read between, and that's the only section of text you can use for answering those questions. So if you write something on line 15 it won't count. And what you do with this particular one is list 4 things about Lydia's family in this section of the text, so from lines 1 to 13. Be specific again, so remember every time we've self-assessed and looked at answers for this, the answers are quite specific. You can use quotes from the text, but I would rephrase them a little bit as well. So I start this saying, Lydia's family, ... So pause the video now and you've got 5 minutes to work on that. So what we're going to do now is we're going to have a little self-assess. So I'll read through the answers, give yourself a tick if you've got them right, give yourself a cross if you have them wrong, and then give yourself a score out of 4 at the bottom. So her mother puts Lydia's breakfast bowl out, homework and pencil, that could be 1 point. Lydia's father drives to work. She has a brother, she has a sister. Her sister's fond of Lydia and waits for her to come down. So those could be either or. Notice for the top one you need all 3 because it's all 1 point. I should have pointed that out earlier. The family eat breakfast together, the family don't know she's dead, and the family have a morning routine. So if you've got any of those answers, those are the ones you could have had. Right, so moving on for task 2. Task 2, what I want you to do is reread this extract. It's lines 14 to 29, and that's because that's what question 2 focuses on this particular section, so have a little read of that. You can go pause the video now to read it. So now you've finished doing that, we're going to have a little look at task 3. So task 3 and the subsequent tasks for... so task 3 and 4 will focus on question 2. This question is on language, and if you're drawing a bit of a blank and not knowing how to answer this question, you can go back to the first lesson I covered on half a sun. I can't remember the exact name of the extract now, but it was half a sun, where I explained in detail on that video how to answer that particular question. Or if you type into YouTube Mr. Bruff, language paper 1, section A, question 2, you'll have a long video on it or a 5-minute video. All you need to do is watch the 5-minute video and that will give you a quick recap of how to answer this question and what's expected. So if you're panicking, do that. And this particular question is asking you, how does the writer use language here to describe Lydia's bedroom? So here's the formulaic thing they prompt you to write about: words and phrases, language techniques and sentence forms. Again, you don't have to write about all 3. I would choose at least 2 though to give a bit of a range. You're looking at about 2 Ps for this answer. It's an 8-mark question and you can score about 4 marks per each piece if you write a nice detailed in-depth piece that really is specific and shows the effect. So not just stating this draws the reader in, or this creates a dramatic effect, but specifically how it creates a dramatic effect and the connotations of that. That's just an example of effect. So what you're going to do for task 3 is there's a little grid here, the language feature, and this is a breakdown of the 3 things that you could include here. As I said, you don't need to include all of them, you could choose to, but this extract does actually include all 3. Some extracts may not, this particular one does. So what I want you to do is put a quote in for a word and phrase that you think shows Lydia's bedroom in an interesting way. Then a language technique and a sentence form. As I said, all 3 are included in this extract, and then write the explain section here, so explain what the writer is showing. You've got about 15 minutes on that, so pause the video and crack on with that task now. Brilliant. So I'd start the video again. So what we're going to do for question 2 is task 4 is answer question 2. And you're going to want to answer it here. So just pop it in. Again, go to handouts. There's P's breakdown and P's sentence starters for you as well. What I've done here, as you can see, is if you're struggling, there's some points to prompt you for helping your writing. So the writer uses repetition and listing to highlight Lydia's belongings. That is used, and that could go under sentence form and language techniques. You've got repetition, and then you've got the listing in the sentence form. There you could also add that it was a complex sentence, and a long one at that. The writer ends the first paragraph with a very short sentence, so you've got the short sentence and sentence form there again. The writer chooses nouns associated with love of school and knowledge. So that's your word phrases in there, and also with that particular point there is a specific terminology. So in your exam you do get marked up higher marks for using specific terminology and technical terminology, and a noun is instead of just saying a word, you say a noun, and that's an example of your knowledge and understanding of technical terminology. The writer uses a sense of smell to describe talcum powder in the room, so that would be language technique, it's sensory description, sensory detail. The writer uses metaphor to show her mum is hoping to see her in bed, so again a technique. You spotted that it's a metaphor, now to explain in detail what the effect is. Try and get several interpretations of the metaphor. So like we did in the war poetry that we covered, we looked at multiple meanings of the same quote and really tried to layer that understanding and analysis, almost like a tiered cake. So you've got your base level, then you dig a bit deeper, and then you've got that real tight zoom in as the top tier of a cake. Think of a tiered wedding cake. That's how I like to think of P's paragraphs. So the writer uses a simile at the end to highlight the empty bedroom. So as I said before, all those are in there. These are points, so that could be the point beginning your P's. If you're struggling, then find an example and then explain it. So you could choose 2 of these if you wanted to write your answer on question 2. So you want to pause the video now and write your answer here. So question 3 for task 5. That's the last question we're covering in this lesson today. Question 3 is your structure. Again, if you're having a bit of panic and thinking, Mum, I can't remember anything about question 3, you can either find the video where I explained it in depth or type onto YouTube, Mr. Bruff, language paper 1, section A, question 3 breakdown, and there will be around a 5-minute video where he goes into detail about that. So that's if you want a quick recap. You now need to look at the whole source. Oh, it's not a capital there. You now need to look at the whole source. So for question 3, it will always be the whole source because they'll be looking at beginning, middle and end. for that section. The text is from the opening novel, so here again it tells you where the extract falls within the text, and that might help you a little bit when you're thinking about its overall placement in the text. How has the writer structured the text to interest you? Again, it's always going to be that interest you. Very ambiguous in what it's asking you. It's asking you how the writer uses structure for effect, how they build things, how they create tension, dramatic effect, and why they're doing that, and how they're doing that. So you can write about what the writer focuses your attention on at the beginning of the text. I'd always write about that, because then you have a baseline. So you're going to want your first bit of structural narratives, your first structural P's to be on the beginning of the text. And then how the writer changes focus on the source. That could be zoom in, zoom out, switch in narrative viewpoint. It could be the narrator goes from outdoors to indoors. It could be a room change in a house. It could be going indoors to outdoors, vice versa, whichever one I haven't covered yet. It could be moving on a train. It could be the character starts walking. It's a change in events and structure. Any other structural features which interest you? So remember in that Mr. Brough video, who covered lots of structural effects. Also in Half a Sun, I attached a PowerPoint where there's a list of all the structural effects. So if you're drawing a blank on that, you want a bit of help, that's where you can go for that. So reread the text. Text and highlight and annotate if you see any of the following structural features. What can I look out for when commenting on structure? So here again, I've listed a whole host of structural patterns. So this will help you when you're highlighting and annotating your text. So read through, highlight, and if you see juxtaposition, highlight that and label it. If you see, does the writer focus on objects in the foreground? If there's a zoom in and a zoom out, highlight all of that and annotate it. You just have to label it. And that's what you need to do for task 5. You've got about 10 minutes for that. It's not an awfully long time, so pause the video now and have a go at that. Right, for task 6, what you've got to do is detailed analysis. So again, I've mentioned that they often want you to write about beginning, middle and end. So what I want you to do is, for this section, bring about 2 points for each section. State what happened, so very, very, very brief overline. Don't retell the story, because it's not really going to get you any marks, but you do need to mention what happened. Explain why it's interesting, and then quotation. So at the beginning, Lydia tells us that Lydia's dead in the very first sentence, but they don't know. Gives us a specific time and date, so it's very specific and factual about Lydia's death. Why is it interesting? Dramatic. We're given more info on the characters, dramatic irony, and builds on tension and intrigue. So, like terminology is stated there, dramatic irony, and it's explained, so it's not just stated. Then a quote to support that. You can get about 2 for each sections. If you're struggling for time, make sure you at least get 1. Okay? So that's what you're going to want to do for task 6. So pause the video now. Now you've got about 15 to 20 minutes to work on that. Right, so for task 6, you've got quite a few there, but just if you're struggling, we can go over some answers here. So I'm not going to talk through all of them, but if you are struggling and you're thinking, I really might not have anything for the end or the middle, pause the video now, read through this, and add to yours if you're struggling. So pause the video and add to yours. Right, so what you're doing now for the end of the lesson, you've got about 20 to 25 minutes, is answer question 3, such as structural analysis. For that, I pick 1 point, explain and quote for each. The task was to try and have 2 for each. That's so you can pick which one you prefer to write about. But I do a P's on 1 point for the beginning, in explain and quote, and then I pick 1 for the middle and 1 for the end. I hope that makes sense. If you've got any questions, please do email me. I'll be going for your OneNote as always. Thanks, Caroline.